Hello and welcome to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. We are delighted that you are one of the two people who've chosen to join us on this New Year's Day rather than watch the college football playoffs. Thank you very much for being with us. I'm your host, Leon Wolf. I am delighted, as always, to be joined by my regular panel of co-hosts. We have, as always, Scott Linscomb with the Cato Institute, Neil Dewing of the Federalist, Jay Caruso of Pocketful of Liberty, F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon, and we're delighted to be joined by our guest host this week, Amy Otto, also of the Federalist. Thanks for coming out, guys. Thanks for taking time out of your New Year's Day celebrations to join in the festivities today. Let's get right into the news. Obviously, the big political topic of the news, we'll start with the less fun stuff, kick things off on the right foot, is, of course, the Steve Scalise fracas, which is a story that now seems to kind of be falling apart at the seams. For those who don't know, it is alleged that Steve Scalise, one of the members of GOP leadership, at least initially was alleged that he spoke at an event that was hosted by David Duke's group in Louisiana back in 2002 when he was still at that time a state legislator. It has since come to light that really and actually the meeting that he spoke at was a homeowners association, which was attended by who knows what, but it wasn't actually a meeting of the group. No one has any video of the group. No one has any indication of what the remarks were. And it seems to be the kind of story that, at least on the substance, doesn't have a lot of merits. But on this topic, and I'm going to throw this, as I traditionally do, first to our guest host, Amy, first question. It seems as though with a lot of these stories, really the kind of correction that comes in later, once the facts roll in, never really seems to reach and percolate to the public's consciousness. Really what happens is the first thing that comes out is the thing that sticks with everybody, and now people remember Steve Scalise spoke to a white nationalist organization, when in fact that may not have been true. He's going to kind of be stuck with this now. And I guess the question is, does this become a problem, at least from a public relations standpoint, for the GOP leadership, and is it something that you think that they ought to address in terms of his position within the caucus?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Leon. I certainly think, it is a shame that what you can do pretty quickly is establish a narrative with specious, limited facts and if it's something as viral as purported racism, it will stick to someone. I do think, what I think is problematic, I guess, when I look at this is Scalise's response was not particularly, of someone who should be in the leadership. He seemed to kind of struggle a bit with it, and then admit he went to the meeting when he actually didn't go to the meeting. I guess when I look at it, I go, if there's someone in Republican leadership and this is the norm, like it or not, we can say we don't like it, and there can be other reasons we don't. Someone in leadership needs to be able to handle these things quickly and shut them down. I think, unfortunately, his response has been a bit floundering at this point, and that may make this stick to him. If he had had a better response initially, maybe he would have been in a position to push back stronger.
So, Bill, let's talk about that. I mean, it seems to me that there are some things that, as a Republican holder of office, and especially as you move up the food chain of public office holder, you have to know these things are going to come at you, right? And as a Republican, you have to know, especially if you're running for any kind of office, and this is what infuriated me about the Todd Akin situation. It's not that his answer was what it was, it's that he was unprepared. I just don't know how it is that these people, as they climb up the food chain, are not prepared for a certain set of pat attacks. How do you not have a canned answer and response for this? And how do you, if you're Steve Scalise, have the response, as Amy noted, to basically admit that you went to the thing before you even check into the facts and see whether it's true? I mean, I understand in the course of a campaign, especially these state-level campaigns, you go and you talk to tens of thousands of groups, and you thought, well, the safest thing for me to do here is just to get an apology on the air real quick. But how do you not know that this particular attack is coming at you and have a better answer prepared?
Well, I mean, I find it interesting that you phrased it as this is a public relations crisis. When it comes to the modern-day GOP, it seems like everything is a public relations crisis in that they have no idea how to possibly get good PR. They've bungled this. They've bungled Akin. Murdoch bungled the response to the controversy that Akin had created. I mean, it seems like the messaging professionals that we have in the party are just so, I guess, have such a tin ear with how to deal with these situations, especially when you see them coming. A Republican who cannot respond to a charge of racism that is as, ridiculous and ludicrous as this one was, really does not deserve to be in leadership. I mean, these are attacks, and we saw the difference between 2012 and 2014 in terms of the war on women. It really seemed like the Republicans had figured out how to get their messaging lined up with, candidates like, Cory Gardner and Joni Ernst. It seemed like we had overcome that, and less than 2 months after this victory, we are sitting here dealing with the same exact thing, which is somebody who has no idea how to handle themselves in a crisis public relations setting. So, I mean, the only thing that Republicans really have going for them is that they control so many of the state houses in the country now that hopefully future generations of Republicans will not suffer from this same sort of, bungling response to everything, because they will have come up at the state level and risen through the lower ranks of politics to actually be prepared. And I think that's something that we should acknowledge after the Tea Party victory. So many of these people were not career politicians. So many of them were, pretty green in terms of dealing with the press. And hopefully we won't have this situation, in the future generation of Republican leadership.
Well, Jay, here's one of the things that bothers me about the way that Republicans respond to this kind of story. And it seems to me that there's a reflexive reaction that Republicans have that Democrats don't have, that I think contributes to a part of the problem, which is that when someone is accused of something like this, or seems at least to step in it, there's a rush on the Republican side of the aisle to be the first person out to be the reasonable Republican and condemn the bad Republican on television before all the facts are in. And even in a case of a guy like Akin, who said something that was legitimately stupid, if that had been a Democrat who had said an equivalently stupid thing, he would not have been piled on by all the other Democrats who are running for elected office in the country. If anybody would have come to them and asked, first of all, the media is not going to do it, but if a media member had come to them and said, what do you think about the stupid thing that Joe Biden said, they would have just said, hey, I'm not Joe Biden, my name is not Joe Biden, ask me a question about me. The Republicans have the exact opposite response. And do you think that it's helpful? Do you think that it's something, especially on these issues where they seem to come up over and over again, is it something we need to do, or is this an approach that we should perhaps teach ourselves to lose the reflexive response?
Well, that's the problem that I had right from the start, was that immediately, as soon as the story came out, before anybody had known exactly what happened, there were people, it was like you sent out an image of a ship and Republicans just jumping off, because that's exactly what happens whenever something like this happens. The moment it comes out, before they verify it, they're just ready to say, okay, we got to get rid of this guy. Got to get rid of this guy. And as we now learn, the story was largely bogus. There was a lot of facts that they got wrong. I mean, normally a journalist probably should not rely on a neo-Nazi bulletin board as a means of their to get their facts. They should check into things a little bit. Yeah, the response was poorly handled, but the underlying issue is that if there wasn't any more digging, if some people hadn't looked and said, I think you guys are getting some stuff wrong, I don't know, it still would have been a PR disaster anyway, because like you said, the initial narrative is what's there, and now Costa and these guys are trying to say, oh, well, now the story has changed to where they don't even care anymore that Scalise wasn't there. Now they're talking about this guy Knight, and they're saying, well, his associations with white supremacists actually goes deeper than what was originally known. Well, who cares? That's not what the story was about. You guys screwed it up to begin with, and now you're covering your rear ends. But getting back to your point, yeah, Republicans are just bad. They're just so reflexively ready to sit there and like throw their guys, just to kick them out, do whatever they can, because I don't understand it. Has there ever been a time when the press is then, the next time something like this happens, say, well, maybe we should go a little easier, because last time they were very reactive to getting rid of this person. So let's take it slow and let's go easy. No, it's just going to be the same thing. Republicans are going to react the same way. Bill made a good point about our rapid response teams are just horrible because they can't deal with these kinds of crises. Rick Perry, take a few lessons from him. When he got indicted, did people even know that Rick Perry was indicted? Not anymore. I mean, unless they hear about it. That response was great. That's what Republicans need to do. learn some lessons and look at where there have been successes and look at Cory Gardner and say, okay, this is the kind of thing that we have to do in the future.
So Neil, obviously one of the main angles to this is, as kind of Jay and Bill have touched on, there's a media angle. The way that they deal with this is not level-handed. It is not fair in comparison with equivalent scandals that hit the left. And I mean, I wrote a post at Red State earlier this week that it was a lot of fun to write. It was just kind of a, as the story was initially percolating, it was kind of going into the question of, well, where are you, media, in reporting on all the things that, Louis Farrakhan has said, and all the Democrat politicians who go and speak on the Nation of Islam and go on their radio programs and do all these other things. And, obviously back in 2012, Newt Gingrich became a presidential frontrunner almost exclusively on the basis of, at the presidential debates, he was the one and only candidate who took on the media as an opponent, as opposed to his other Republican opponents. And clearly among the base, there's a visceral kind of desire for Republicans to Republican office holders to take on the media head on. I mean, when these talking heads come at them and ask them a question, throw it back in their face. And I guess the question for you is that helpful in the minds of the average voter? Is that something that is satisfying only to the people who are already tuned into Fox News and reading Red State all day, or is it something that will help our image with swing voters, do you think?
I think to a limited extent it might, but it would be extremely easy for the media to paint that Republican as bad. These people are, of course, filming everything and editing everything, and they're going to be showing it on the nightly news or on the 24-hour news, what have you. So, they really hold those cards there. So there's only so much appeal outside of the primaries that a Republican will get for taking on the media. As regards Scalise, I'm sort of troubled because I find myself on the same side of an issue as Mark Levin, which is an uncomfortable place for me to be. I happen to think Scalise should have withdrawn from his leadership role almost immediately for a few simple reasons. Let me just go here point by point, with the caveat that as the facts come out and as the truth comes out, it does appear that Scalise is entirely blameless. As we know, in politics, the truth is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the perception. And what is the perception of Republicans? The perception of Republicans is that they are racist. They are the party of racism. If you ask the man on the street, are Republicans racist? He'll say, yeah, I think so. Keeping Scalise in leadership does absolutely nothing to address that perception. In fact, it only reinforces it, because most people are going to remain ignorant of the facts as they come out. They are going to latch on to this initial story, this initial bit of mud that was slung upon this guy, and that's all they're going to remember. And that same media will delight in bringing it up. Well, accusations of racism dogged this person, as long as he remains upfront. So that's a problem. The other issue, Scalise as a person, as a congressman, is not indispensable. He's not an irreplaceable person. We could do the same thing with somebody else. So I happen to think that withdrawing from the leadership position would be the best thing he could do for his party, as his party assumes control of Congress at a very difficult time in this nation when racism is a toxic issue. Toxic issue. Nobody's rational when it comes to race. They're only going to remember this guy attended a Klan rally. So what Scalise could do, withdraw from leadership, hunker down, work in Congress, work with the leadership, and continue to have a productive, career as the Republicans now control the Congress. Wait for those facts to permeate because in the next couple weeks. It's going to be like another week or so of this, and as soon as the Republicans take control, it's going to be, accusations of racism, that whole little weasel word. So you allow those facts to permeate, and meanwhile, he's not distracting from this initial time when Republicans are going to be setting their agenda for the next 2 years. So that would be what a party loyalist would do. He would fall on his sword. That would be the honorable position, and that's what I think he should do. So this puts me on the side of Mark Levin. This is really hard for me because I'm usually the guy who's like rah leadership, go establishment. Not this time. I think that this guy just needs to do the honorable thing and withdraw.
Well, Scott, I mean, what about that, Scott? I mean, do you agree with that, or don't you think, and maybe we can allay some of Neil's concerns here, don't you think that gives the other side, in essence, what is a heckler's veto? I mean, if an accusation of racism can be this quickly and shoddily concocted, is to say 10 years ago this guy went to a rally, we have no record, we have no video, we have no audio, we don't even know what manner of gathering it is. If that is all it takes to have someone say, well, you've been accused of racism and now you must withdraw from leadership, doesn't that essentially give a heckler's veto to the other side? Because I'm with Neil. I'm not a fan of Scalise as a congressman, but now it almost is more important to me that he stay in leadership to not give the other side the idea that this can be done so easily. What do you think, Scott?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with you that there is an aspect of the heckler's veto going on here, but at the same time, as we already discussed, he and the GOP leadership and the Republican Party generally allowed themselves to be heckled by what was essentially a storm front post and the words of a Louisiana white supremacist, which is shocking that they're not that reliable of sources. I mean, I'm just stunned at this. So, I mean, I think it's twofold. One, they shouldn't have let themselves be heckled. But once they did, I mean, I think that, I can't believe I'm saying this, Neil has a point, that once they've allowed themselves to be bullied, then there is a legitimate argument that they should that he needs to move on. If he's not going to fight it immediately, then he's put himself in a horrible position to ever do so. Now that said, I do want to say one other thing, though. I mean, I do think, not to sound just completely trite, but there is the media double standard here is, I think, one of the reasons why Republicans seem so horribly ill-suited on the PR level to deal with this. There was a NBC nightly news story about Scalise when this first broke, and now that we've gotten the truth on the matter, it's total crickets out there. And so,
Exactly.
I think part of the problem they have is not really. I mean, certainly, in the Cory Gardner situation, others that there does appear to be a better way to handle this than what the Republicans did. But at the same time, I mean, you gotta feel for the guys a little bit here, where there is no benefit of the doubt, that there is an immediate presumption of guilt based on some of the most disreputable sources you could possibly have, and dealing with that is not easy. There is no simple answer. And so, I think it's a little unfair to just roundly condemn the response when, the deck is so stacked against them.
Right, and let me just say one thing. Wait, one thing. The media thing about, like Neil was talking about, I just want to rebut that a little bit, because if he steps aside,
You may try, sir.
that's not going to, the media is not going to sit there and say, oh, he resigned, okay. You know what the next question is going to be? Well, Speaker Boehner, how could someone of such ill repute get to the level where he was going to be House Majority Whip? It's still going to be a pressing issue. In fact, if he steps aside at this point, you just elongate the story. If you look at the news now, nobody's talking about that. You know what happened just a couple of hours ago? Mario Cuomo passed away. That is going to consume the entire weekend. By Sunday, no one's going to know who Steve Scalise is. So I think at this point, you do deal with what you have. Boehner's already come out in support of him. McCarthy's already come out in support of him. If he steps aside now, it's just gonna take the story and just keep it in the news for another week or two.
I agree, Jay, and I think that the danger that you have is that if Scalise withdraws now, it takes a story that is based at this point on disreputable sources and easily debunked sources and makes it a credible story just based upon the fact that he resigned. Because you don't resign a leadership position if there's not, some fire behind the smoke.
Why can't he just come out and say, I am removing myself from the equation because this scurrilous accusation is distracting from the positive agenda that my party wants to set for this nation?
Because nobody cares about the statement.
If that's a stated reason, and that's the party line. So Boehner just says, yeah, he withdrew so you people wouldn't talk about it. So we're not going to talk about it, and I'm not going to answer any more questions. And then he's going to do what Jay wants a politician to do and stub out a cigarette on the podium and leave. That's
nobody's going to pay attention to the speech he gives. They're going to say, well, of course he's going to say that. Of course he's going to say that. What they're going to pay attention to is what he did, which is resign. And I think that's really going to be what the story is that if he resigns, it lends credence to the fact that there was truth to this. And I think that's a dangerous precedent to set. Yeah, in any event, let's move on to our next topic. We spent 20 minutes on Scalise, and I think probably this story will end up blowing over. But let's move on to a couple of New York-centric items, a couple of major New York items in the news right now, and we'll go back to Amy again first. And one of the stories that has cropped up about New York lately is that the police in New York seem to be on what is variously described as a working strike by some. There is a report in the New York Post that their arrests on the trivial quote-unquote offenses have gone way down, some of them down by 66%, some of them down by 93%. And the question is, are they doing this in protest of de Blasio, or are they doing it because they're afraid to police their own streets? What do you think is really going on in New York about this?
Well, I mean, at this point, it's frankly, it's disappointing what's going on in New York at this point. You have de Blasio on one hand that, has had a pretty much horrible behavior at this point and disparaging and making everything about every case that's been in New York about race, which to me is a shame because I thought it was an opportunity for the Garner case to actually be about power and abuse of power. I don't think it had anything to do with race in some level, but we're now not going to be able to have that conversation. So I think that's the first big miss here is we have this conversation shifted to a framework that's not even appropriate. And then you have the police. The police, no matter what, are a public union. They don't have the right to strike, in my opinion. So what they're doing is incorrect. Like it or not, they are meant to do their job. And you've seen Reagan, when it was the air traffic controllers. We don't allow these kind of things. So I think de Blasio is getting an end run, and it's actually terrible because his leadership is so poor at this point. He's not stepping up to take control of the situation, and he's letting it fester and burn. And now you're letting the policemen's union take advantage of this, which is going to turn into, I worry when the right jumps so far into immediately just defending the NYPD when it's not the beat cop on the street that this argument really is about. This is now union bosses arguing with a left-wing mayor. So we have to remember that this may be two left-wing kind of entities arguing amongst each other. Really, it's not so much us, or I guess our side of this would be is yes, I definitely want the beat cop protected, and there shouldn't be this atmosphere where people think it's like open season on policemen, certainly, but that's really not the case. I think that's a bit overblown. I think it's of course, being in the NYPD has always had its risks. I don't think that that's not only changed much more even with this situation. I don't believe they have the right to do this, but I do find it strange that they're only only making arrests or issuing subpoenas for things they need to. I mean, I think that says something broader here, which is the solution is why are they policing so many things they don't need to? Why aren't the cops focused on exactly where and how we should be using the use of force in society? And that's the conversation that we won't get to have in this. So it upsets me that both sides are just deviating in these two norms that won't actually solve the problem. And we won't actually have an intelligent conversation about what the actual source of the problem is, which is, to me, the overregulation, the overburdening of so many rules and laws in our society, and then being an average beat cop and trying to then figure out through that myriad what you're supposed to actually police, I think is pretty challenging on all sides of the fence.
So I think that's an interesting point, right? I mean, so, number one, we would say, hey, look, obviously, if they can do this for 2 months and the city of New York doesn't fall into disrepair, why were they writing so many tickets for these trivial offenses in the first place? And I agree with that basic instinct. I think, the libertarian side of me says absolutely, there's overregulation. They probably are writing too many citations for trivial offenses anyway. But on the other hand, that's not why they're doing it. They're not doing it as a protest against the overreach of the municipal government. They're not doing it as a protest against the heightened regulatory state. They're doing it because of a protest against the mayor of the city, who is, in essence, their boss. And I think that you've hit on a key point. And I'm going to go to Bill for this one. I mean, I think a lot of people, and a lot of people on the conservative side of the fence, have an instinctual reaction to take the side of cops because for a lot of these people who live, in the exurbs or the rural areas, they're thinking of officer friendly, and they're not understanding that in a lot of these cities, the police unions are basically the lifeblood of the democratic political machines. I mean, they are completely different. All right, Bill, I know you've got relatives here, and I want you to. I can went to you for this because if anybody's going to have a defense of this action, I knew that it would be you. What do you think? Do you think that their reaction to this and to de Blasio is justified?
I think your generalization as the police is the foot soldiers for the democratic political machine is completely off base. And
no, not individual officers. Not individual officers. It's the unions who are driving this.
The police officers union was the only one that didn't endorse Obama in 2012 and 2008. Only major public sector union that didn't. But
that's national. I'm talking about the municipal machines.
No, municipal. Who do you think got Giuliani elected? Who do you think turned out big for Bloomberg when Republicans the world over were saying this guy's a Democrat now? It was police unions. So I think to characterize them as foot soldiers of the Democratic Party is a misstep, not just on the individual level, but as an organizational level. These guys know who's going to come out and abandon them anytime somebody gets shot. They know it's going to be Al Sharpton. They know that Republicans don't sit there and pal around with Mumia Abu-Jamal. So I think you're mischaracterizing, you're mistaking police unions for other public sector unions. Now, that's not to say that police unions do not raid the public treasury the same way that teachers unions do. I'm not arguing that at all. And in terms of defending the police, I mean, right now we are going through in the Port of Washington a huge work slowdown being orchestrated by the Longshoremen's Union. And Republicans have been rightly outraged by this. We should be just as outraged when the New York City Police Department, no matter how much we admire the work that they do in keeping that city safe, is actively abandoning their job in protest, if that is what's going on. That's why not just Ronald Reagan, but Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the champion of modern unionism, said that he would never support public sector unions, particularly in public safety, because you cannot strike against the public safety. So I think we're seeing a pretty much an abuse of union authority here, if that turns out to be the case. Now, there is something else to consider here, and that's the fact that a lot of these guys are basically intimidated that they do not have the support of their boss, and the lack of arrests is, part and parcel with the fact that de Blasio is a man who came right into the city and said, we are getting rid of stop and frisk. So arrest rates were already trending downward just by abandoning stop and frisk to begin with. So maybe this is a culmination here where they're saying, you know what, if we're going to catch flack for actively policing in our city streets and enforcing the laws that have been handed us by the legislature, well then, why do them at all? So there is a great libertarian experiment that a lot of people have hinted at. The Federalist has been giving great coverage to it, but we also have to consider why some of these minor infractions have been policed to begin with. And I'm not talking here about the sale of untaxed cigarettes so much as the broken windows police theory that we forget, kind of like how the millennial generation has never known airport travel without the TSA. We forget what New York City was like before Mayor Giuliani took office, and it was, to be blunt, a hellhole. It was full of crime. Property crime was through the roof. I know libertarians aren't big fans of the police force, but I'm very interested to see how the flagrant violation of private property that defined 1970s and 1980s New York City through street crime is supposed to jive with our libertarian tendencies. There was a reason these laws and these police practices were put into place. It wasn't to arrest minorities, it was to basically stomp the to I guess tear out the root of crime that can happen when you have a multiplier effect. You don't enforce the laws on jumping the turnstile. Those guys may turn into subway pushers someday. And judging by the effectiveness of Mayor Giuliani's and broken windows police theory in New York through the 90s and the early aughts, I think we've forgotten what it was like to live in an era before that. So that would be my, I guess, the grand experiment here is, do we want to return to the policing policies of the 1970s and 1980s and bear the consequences, bear the same fruit that we've seen before, which will lead to an even starker reaction given the improvement in police technology.
So, Scott, I'm going to go to you next on this. Where do you come down substantively on this? I mean, it seems to me that the police, the NYPD, is using this as a public relations tool in a political war against de Blasio. I think that most everyone would admit that that's what's happening on a political level. And as much as it's loath to all of us to take the side of Bill de Blasio, who's next door to being an avowed communist, the facts on the ground are that the two officers who were killed last weekend were the first two officers who had been killed in the line of duty since 2011. And I saw something in Newsday last week that since 1999, police officers had committed 179 homicides in New York since that time. 179, as compared to something like 11 officers killed by gunfire. So more than a 10-to-1 ratio of cops killing civilians as opposed to civilians killing cops. And that, I guess, is not what's so much troubling to me, because you would figure, I mean, that's part of the nature of what police do. What's troubling to me is that in those 179 cases where the police did commit a homicide, did kill a person, there were only 3 indictments handed down, 3 for anything, resulting in a total of 1 conviction for a non-jail time offense. Now, even if you're of the opinion that the vast majority of time the police use lethal force, they're in the right, that's a percentage I don't know that anybody can believe in good faith, that 178 out of 179 times the police did not use excessive force when killing a civilian. What side of this issue do you come down on as between the police and de Blasio? Do you think that there's a legitimate concern here about not even necessarily what the police behavior is, but a lack of accountability when they do go off the rails?
Yeah. No, and as much as it pains me to say this, similar to agreeing with Neil in the original segment, I'm pretty firmly on de Blasio's side in terms of de Blasio versus the police. As much as we don't like the nanny-statism of Manhattan and of policing minor infractions, whether it be selling loosies or doing whatever, the reality is we have a rule of law, and we have a structure and a system in place, and we don't permit the police or the executive to just simply disregard that law and disregard its duty and its obligations. And this is kind of an ends justifying the means thing here when some conservatives and libertarians say, hey, this is great, the cops are no longer enforcing this. Well, yes, but they're doing so not out of some sort of moralistic view on the laws themselves, but instead in order to score political points against an opponent. And that is abhorrent, and it should be a serious concern for any conservative or libertarian who really believes in process, structure, and the rule of law. And I would ask, conservatives who are all up in arms about the discretion of our executive branch and of our president when it comes to enforcing certain laws, whether it be DOMA or immigration laws, to see how they reconcile with that, with their applause of the NYPD for its discretion in not enforcing similar or the laws under which they're sworn to uphold. It really just doesn't jive, in my opinion. And as much as de Blasio is a rather irksome character, it doesn't change these realities, I don't think.
What about that, Jay? I mean, I tend to agree with Scott on this, that it is not within the realm of the New York police to decide whether or not they're going to do their job or not do their job based upon a political fight. And I'm moreover troubled by the idea that the police would get to, I think, deliberately influence the political process this way by refusing to do their jobs in the hope that the voters kick out de Blasio, which seems to be what they're doing. What do you think about this? Where do you come down, Jay?
All right. Well, on that issue, in terms of the cops with the arrests going down, no, I don't agree with them there, and I think Bratton is probably going to come to a point where he's going to tell his top guys, hey, filter it down, start doing your job, or else you're going to be disciplined for it. So on that one, you know, I'm with you guys on that. I don't think they should be, but that in terms of the overall, I think it's minor. This is a much bigger issue, and it goes back to, first of all, de Blasio during his campaign bashing the cops, bashing stop and frisk. Now, if you go back to 2013, NYPD approval, despite stop and frisk at that point, was 70%. Crime is like there's virtually no crime in most major areas of New York City. It's like you have to go up into, you know, Harlem, the upper areas of Harlem, Brownsville area, Brooklyn, and certain areas of the Bronx. You can be all over Manhattan, most of Queens, a lot of Brooklyn, and you're not going to find any crime. The other thing I wanted to touch on was your issue about the number of people that the police have, how many homicides they've committed, or how many people have been killed by police over, what was the period you said, since 1999 or something like that?
Since 99, yes.
Okay. Well, there's some context to that. I wrote a blog post about the firearms discharge report from 2013. You know how many people the NYPD killed in 2013? They killed 8. Okay. Now, if you go back and you stretch that over since 1999 and you come up with a number of 179, it sounds like a lot. But here are some numbers. This is from 2013 alone. Total radio assignments, 4.5 million. Radio assignments involving weapons, 80,000. Arrests involving weapons displayed or used or possessed, 25,000. Gun arrests, 5,000. Criminal shooting incidents, 1,100. That's in 2013 alone. Okay, and crime has progressively gone down since 1999. So if you went back, I'm sure these numbers would have been higher. So in terms of context, in terms of the number of people that the police have killed versus the number of incidents where they've been involved in these kinds of situations, the numbers are extremely low. If you go back to the 70s, go back to 1971 when these firearm discharge reports were started to be kept, police killed 93 people. Okay, and now that number has gone down to 8. So this whole idea that the police are too aggressive in terms of, and they're not being prosecuted for it, I think you have to look a little bit deeper.
Well, Jay, hold on. Let me push back.
One more point. Okay. And then one more point. The biggest thing here, and I'm telling you right now, nothing is ever going to get worked out between the police unions, the police, and the mayor as long as Al Sharpton is in the picture. Okay? There was a post by Josh Marshall where he interviewed a cop in New York who was a self-described progressive Democrat who understands just how toxic Al Sharpton is. And he knows that as long as he is there by de Blasio's side, that the cops are never going to respect de Blasio. When I wrote a post about that, I said the first thing that de Blasio has to do is tell Sharpton to take a hike. At that point, Sharpton will turn on him. Him and the cops now have a common enemy, and that's where they could start to find mutual ground. But until they do that, until he does that, and if he doesn't do it, this acrimony is going to be going on for the entire 4 years that he's going to be, the other 3 years he'll be mayor, I'm assuming he doesn't get reelected. Okay, so
let me kind of give my response to that. I'm going to let Neil chime in here, and then we'll come back to you, Jay. My response to that is, isn't that all of these numbers kind of beside the point with respect to the issue of not saying necessarily that the police are bad or good, but that there's a lack of accountability when they are bad. After all, Neil, you can't say, Your Honor, I was married to my wife for 20 years, and we saw each other once a day for 20,000 days, and so we had good interactions. On none of those days did I ever pull out my gun and shoot her. One day I did. I pulled out my gun, I shot her, she's dead. But what you have to look at is the total context of our marriage, and the vast majority of interactions we had were good and kind and peaceful, and so therefore you shouldn't send me to jail for the one time that I did shoot her.
Unless she came at you with a butcher knife.
Well, I understand that, Jay. I understand, but it isn't to the point to say the vast majority of these interactions are good. It doesn't answer the question that you should still be held accountable when they are bad. Isn't that the case? I mean, Neil.
Well,
I mean,
if you can prove that there was negligence or wrongdoing, the thing is that these police officers are put in dangerous situations. They're put in tricky situations. They're put in situations where they have to react without necessarily having time to gather every piece of evidence that would put every action of a perpetrator or alleged perpetrator in context. And so sometimes these things happen, and that's one of the things that we as a society have agreed upon, is we entrust certain men with the responsibility and the ability to use force to maintain order and to keep the law. And so these things will happen. It's just one of those things that when you say to somebody you're authorized to use force on people, sometimes it'll get misapplied. But the vast majority of the time, I would say you have to err on the side of the guy who is entrusted by the public with that responsibility. That's now that being said, I want to circle back here to these reduced crime figures. If it does come out that this is a deliberate, reduction in making arrests and that sort of thing, that is an abdication of responsibility. Now, I don't know if it is. I don't know if it is at all. Bill, made some great points about that. But that is the sort of thing that will take a prudent wariness of the police, because you do have to be wary of them, and turn that into outright distrust, which is toxic.
well, what do you think about that, Amy? I mean, would you come down on the side with Neil and say, listen, you got to give the benefit of the doubt to the guy with the badge and the gun, or do you come down? I guess it's a matter of perspective. My feeling about it is you come down and say that the people who are given the badge and the gun are held to a higher standard than the rest of us. I mean, that's part of the responsibility that we saddle them with as a part of the job. They have a legally privileged monopoly on the use of physical force, of violent force, and isn't that something that we should hold them to? And it doesn't seem legitimate to you that 178 of the 179 cases where officers used lethal force was justified in this time period.
I definitely think police need to be held to a higher standard. That's part of the role in itself. I think citizens, we have a Bill of Rights for the reason. We are innocent until proven guilty, and that is something precious and important to freedom in our society. It would be very easy to be a cop if your judgment was the sole decision maker. I think we saw this movie. I think it's called Judge Dredd. But I don't think
Awesome
that's. It is quite an awesome movie, and it's certainly a comforting fantasy that there can be a single decider to protect us all. But I would hate to live in a world where that's the case, because it may not always go your way. So in this case, the police need to be held to a higher standard. As far as the stats, it's great that the police have done extremely well on the job for some period of time. But I agree that fundamentally, when they do wrong, they need to be held accountable. And I think what the public feels right now is they aren't being held accountable when things do go wrong, and that they need to be held accountable. Unless you have a feeling that the police are acting in a just manner, you aren't going to trust them.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up, I think, for our political portion of the show. I think we're going to move now into kind of a lightning round. We're going to have some New Year's predictions for 2015, and we're going to go around the horn here for everybody. Nobody has to be excused for any of these topics, so all of you, I'm sure, are going to have some fearless predictions for what is going to happen in 2015. This is going to be recorded on posterity for the internet forever, so that we can all be embarrassed by what we have said. And the first topic we're going to have is I'm going to ask you guys to predict who's going to be the Super Bowl champ this year. Talking about this year, playoffs are starting on Saturday. Who do you think is going to win this year's Super Bowl? Scott Linscomb.
As much as I would like to go with my hometown Dallas Cowboys, I got to go with Seattle.
Who do you think they're going to beat?
Patriots.
All right, Seahawks over the Patriots. Neil, what do you got for us?
I will also go Seahawks.
Over the Patriots?
Yeah.
All right, what do you think, Jay? Jay, you got your mute on.
There we go. It's not going to be very original here. I think the Seahawks are going to win as well. I'm trying to think of another team in the AFC that I think could actually get there, but I don't think it's going to be anybody. I think they're going to face the Patriots and they're going to win again. Repeat champs.
All right, Bill, who you got?
Cowboys over the Patriots, no doubt. Tony Romo, he's got it this year.
Yeah, baby.
Facts.
Oh,
Facts.
We'll just make sure that if they need a late field goal in their playoff game over the Seahawks, we'll be sure that Tony Romo is going to have a solid hold for the place kicker there. All right, Amy.
Jan Bailey, record holder.
I'm going with the Seahawks as well because that's my husband's pick. I didn't have one. I'm a diehard Eagles fan, which is just a sad state for me. So
Mute her.
At least you're not a Giants fan, Amy.
Get no Eagles fans over here.
All right. So consensus, I'm going to have to go with the Seahawks. I think they're going to edge out the Bears in the playoffs this year. So, yeah, I don't watch football that much.
They're
We're going to go
the
to a subject that I do watch a lot about. Scott, who do you think is going to be our World Series champ this year in 2015?
Geez. You know, that I don't know. I'm going to just say the Texas Rangers since that's whom I always root for. I really have no idea given all the off-season moves. Really couldn't tell you.
Scott predicts that the Texas Rangers will go from worst to first despite adding literally no players in the offseason.
Everybody was injured. Do you realize that the Texas Rangers had more men play in their starting roster than any team in history, and it was by like 10 guys. So they're all back from injury. I'm predicting big things.
Yes, all their mediocre players will do much better this year now that they're not injured. Neil Dewing, who is going to win the World Series this year?
I will say the San Francisco Giants will repeat.
All right. Jay, who you got for the World Series champ this year?
The Detroit Tigers will beat the Los Angeles Dodgers in the World Series this year.
You think Scherzer's coming back to the Tigers?
Yes.
No, it's untrue.
No, you don't think that?
Yes.
I don't think he's coming back to the Tigers either, and I don't know how they're going to make
the
up
Tigers
those
are.
lists.
The Tigers have said they're not going to sign him.
Well, they say many
They
things.
say a lot of things in baseball, but yeah, it doesn't mean anything.
Bill, who you got for the World Series champ this year?
I think that Matt Harvey is going to no-hit the Detroit Tigers in Game 5 of the World Series to deliver the Mets the World Series this year.
Well,
29 years.
Wait,
we're
and
due.
you people, and you laughed at my Rangers pick? No, come on.
I got something to say
Yeah,
about this
definitely.
guy.
I definitely left.
This is-
Oh man, Zach Wheeler is going to throw the second perfect game in Game 4.
Yeah, okay.
Don Larson. It's going to be great. You
The
guys
Mets,
watch.
I think, are going to be an improved team this year, but I hope everyone is watching this show because it will be the only time on television, the internet, or anywhere else that anyone is going to predict that the Mets are going to win the World Series this year. So this is a unique
On
event.
a no-hitter. Call.
Yes.
Happen.
Amy, you got a World Series prediction for us.
again, phoning it in, the San Francisco Giants.
All right. Well, my own personal prediction, I'm going to go with the Dodgers. I think that the Dodgers were a good team entering this offseason, and they have made themselves substantially better. They're hard to predict, the baseball playoffs, but I think the Dodgers are going to take it. I don't think the Giants are going to make the playoffs. I think you guys are going to be disappointed by that, but I would predict that the Dodgers are going to take the World Series over the Angels in an all-Los Angeles World Series. That's my prediction for 2016. All right. Moving on to political matters. Scott, who's going to win the Ames Straw Poll? This first presidential contest of the pre-election year. Of course, Michelle Bachmann won it last time and ended up flaming out before Iowa even rolled around. Who do you think is going to win the Ames Straw Poll, set themselves up as the early frontrunner for 2016?
I'm going to go with Rand Paul just because of his Iowa operation, but I wouldn't be surprised if it were Mike Huckabee, which would pretty much make me curl up into a little ball and vomit profusely. But he's got a lot of fans.
We don't need to
there.
hear about your New Year's, Scott.
Hey Scott, hey, don't worry. Last time Mike Huckabee didn't just win the Ames Straw Poll. Well, he didn't win the Ames Straw Poll. He won the whole Iowa caucus,
Yep.
and it all turned out okay because John McCain got elected. So don't worry, Or got
Better than Mike
nominated.
Huckabee.
All right. Neil Dewing, who you got for the Ames straw poll winner?
I'm going to say Ben Carson because the Republic is doomed.
Yes. All right. This is. We keep Neil on the show so that everyone will know what it's feel like to be trolled by Republican leadership. All right, Dan Caruso, who you got for the straw poll winner?
It will be Rick Perry.
Rick Perry.
He's been there a number of times. He's got a good operation up there. Rick Perry will win the straw poll.
All right, bold prediction. You think he's gonna come back and have some better debate performances this time around?
If you've seen him, he has been. You've seen him.
Well, he's not high on back pain medicines. So
no, he's certainly not.
He'll do a little bit better.
Much improved. A lot of the kind of like yeah kind of attitude that he had before is also gone. It's much more measured. He definitely wants to make another run, no doubt about it.
All right, Bill, who you got for the Ames straw poll winner?
Ames straw poll winner. I think Rand Paul is going to run a very impressive operation, but in the end, I think given his World Series performance, Matt Harvey unanimously wins the straw poll.
Which will take place before the baseball season is even a third of the way over.
Well, that's how much of a guarantee it is that he throws this perfect hand.
Very handsome.
Yes, all right. Amy, who do you think will be the Ames straw poll winner this year?
Well, if we were all lucky and we'd all win, maybe they would cancel the Ames straw poll. But since they won't, probably, and it will continue, I'm going to troll Neil Dewing here and say it's probably going to be Ted Cruz, even though Rand Paul would likely, even though in reality I think Rand Paul probably from a base set has likely the best operation to do that kind of turnout if it comes the case. But I think a Ted Cruz could really upset the things there for the straw poll, just to retweak Neil just a touch there.
Yeah, he could definitely upset some things.
Please, let's hear establishment sentiments from the guy wearing a tuxedo right now. This is only going to inflame Ted Cruz backers even more.
They're very easy. They're very easy to annoy. I sometimes don't even mean to do it, and they just get mad at me. I don't know what I.
You got your Victorian, bedboard behind you.
Yeah, Downton Abbey. It's like.
Yes. Well, the study was a shambles this evening.
The help got into the champagne last night, Neil. Tragic study.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that my probably least favorite candidate in the field, Rand Paul, will also win the Ames straw poll this year. So I'm going to go with probably the majority, or at least the plurality pick amongst the panelists tonight. All right, so next roundtable question. Will there be a government shutdown, either whole or partial, in 2015? Of course, most of the government is funded through September. At that point, will there be a showdown and ultimately a shutdown? Scott, what do you think?
No, definitely not. GOP is way too afraid of that word.
Neil, what do you think?
I also
Will
think
Ted
no.
Cruz be able to pull it off for you?
No. It's not going to happen. No shutdown.
All right, Neil or Jay, what do you think?
Not a chance. In fact, there is already a bet down between Mr. Dewing and one Mr. Thomas LeDuc of FTR Radio that the Republicans are going to cave next month when it comes to DHS funding. Republicans have said they were going to hold up some of the DHS funding because of executive amnesty. And the moment Mr. Obama comes out there and says, well, the Republicans are going to want to hold up national security, make us more vulnerable to terrorist attacks, they can go ahead and do that, but that's not what I want to do. And they'll just fold like a cheap tent, and they'll give him whatever he wants.
And I'm actually betting that the Republicans will do this irresponsible thing and actually move towards shutting down the government.
Just shutting down one little thing.
Hey, Jay, was that an Obama impersonation, or is that Ken Burns?
No, it was a surprisingly good Obama impersonation is what it was. I never saw that coming from Jay Caruso. Bill, what do you think? We're going to have a shutdown in 2015, either of the whole government or just of DHS?
Not so much a shutdown as a new federal holiday will be declared, and the government will disband when Matt Harvey throws a no-hitter to win the World Series.
All right. Amy, what do you think on this question?
There will be no shutdown with the leadership we have at this point. We know shutdowns lead to horrible things like wave elections, so we wouldn't want to.
Yes. Yes, Neil, you've been trolled again. All right. All right, so next, rapid-fire question. Scott, how many vetoes will we have from President Obama in 2015? How many vetoes?
Well, I was going to go with 2, but I'm now going to go with 3, the third being the official Matt Harvey Day, passed unanimously by Congress. I think he'll veto Matt Harvey Day, so I'll go with 3.
Supermajority. It's fine.
What do you think, Neil?
How many Obama vetoes? I think there will be 12, because once a month the Republicans are going to repeal Obamacare.
So that's going to be it, though. No other vetoes on anything else.
It's the monthly Obamacare repeal vote, and yes, nothing else. They're gonna.
Jay, how many vetoes is Obama going to have in 2015?
I can't give an official number. It's as many as it takes.
That's the game, Jay. You have to give an official number.
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say it's as many as it takes before the press starts wondering the reason why they're giving him bills to veto is because they're racist. So maybe 1? Okay.
All right, Bill, what do you think? How many vetoes will Obama have in 2015?
I think I'm going to take the over on 12. I'm going to use Neil's baseline of 12. I don't think Obama has the gumption to veto Matt Harvey Day, but I do think I do think you will see some partially passed, some smaller components of immigration reform that will get through, and Obama will veto them, just saying send me a comprehensive package or nothing else. So on something like that, perhaps on something like the minimum wage, I could see him, vetoing a compromise proposal. And I actually think we're going to see at least one specific attempt that will pass both houses to reform the National Labor Relations Board, and I think that's definitely going to get vetoed, and I don't think we'll have the votes to override it.
Amy, how many vetoes do you think we're going to have?
Well, I think the ones Bill said make sense. I think the Harvey Day will be vetoed, but when I look at it, I think Keystone likely is going to get passed and would get vetoed. I think Obamacare will probably be, and unlike Neil's, once a month, which sounds really fun to me. I would like once a week, but probably will just be once early on before the GOP then caves in something horrific to upset the base. They will do one, throw the Obamacare over the fence thing. I think they'll do it once. I think also some sort of tax reform will get passed through both houses, possibly, and Obama will veto it because, the Republicans hate the poor or something. He'll make up a reason. I think also, I agree also with I think some sort of logical immigration step might be taken, and Obama will veto it just for a show vote to throw it back in their face to say it's not sufficient and it's cruel or something like that. So, there's about 4 or 5. I'm thinking that a minimum. There may be a few. So I'm going to go with 6 that I haven't picked, but I'll go 6.
I think my own cynical view is that there is going to be one, which is going to be the Keystone Pipeline bill. I think that's going to be the one bill he's going to veto. And other than that, I don't think anything substantive really gets through both chambers. I think that Harry Reid is going to decide that he's going to put the brakes on as much as he possibly can, which is basically everything except for nominations, which we control the chamber on. And I just don't foresee much of anything getting through both houses without Obama's okay anyway. I don't think that Harry Reid is going to allow that to happen. So I think that we may see one, and I think we're going to see a lot more of the same over the next year. I think Obama's going to continue to do essentially whatever he wants to do via executive order until someone steps up and stops him. And I don't see anybody in either chamber of the House with the pull to make that happen. So that's my own cheerful New Year's pick for how many vetoes we're going to have, and it's based upon the idea that I don't think that Congress is going to pass anything that Obama doesn't want passed anyway, other than a Keystone Pipeline, which I think there are enough Democrat votes to push through so that Obama can veto it. Well, guys, our final inside joke, I guess, question for lightning round. Every week we say to ourselves that we're going to cover genetically modified organisms on the show. How many times will we cover GMOs on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends in 2014? Bill?
I'm going 1 because I just wrote an awesome story at the Washington Free Beacon about GMOs, and everyone should go read it now.
Fantastic. And by the way, I'm actually pretty well versed on Mets history. The Mets are my second favorite baseball team, and I predict that Matt Harvey Day will actually be the day that he goes and gets his second Tommy John surgery on his non-throwing elbow, which he will somehow require.
I thought you said you didn't want the obscenity rating on our
All right, guys. Thank you guys very much for joining us. Thanks to everybody who is watching for tuning in. We appreciate you taking time out of your New Year's Day. And for those of you who are listening to the podcast later or watching us on YouTube later, we thank you guys for tuning in as well. I want to thank my regular panel of hosts, Scott Linscomb of the Cato Institute, Neil Dewey of the Federalist, Jay Caruso, Pocketful of Liberty, and F. Bill McMorris, the Washington Free Beacon. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate, as always, your insightful comments, except for you, Neil.
Yeah. Happy New Year.
You are wearing fantastic
Amy Otto,
tops.
too. Don't forget Amy.
Yes, no, but she gets a special thanks. Guest host Amy Otto of the Federalist, thank you especially for taking time out of your New Year's Day to help class up the joint. And we appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks a lot. We'll be back next week on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. See ya.